The Chinese island of Hong Kong has come under the international spotlight once again as China implements a security law over their territory and hence continues to see the international community use Hong Kong as an excuse to undermine China. But is it really working? Well, attention has been drawn to the island by the likes of the United States of America and Britain. But for China, the affairs and issues that are happening on the island is solely a matter for China, and any foreign interference is not welcome, as demonstrated by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
中方不顾中方的严正交涉，执意在英国国民海外护照问题上搞政治操弄，公然违背承诺，违反国际法和国际关系基本准则，对香港事务和中国内政横加干涉。中方对此坚决反对。由于英方违反承诺在先，中方将考虑不承认 英国国民海外护照作为有效旅行证件，并保留采取进一步措施的权利。
The offer by the British to issue up to 3 million passports to Hong Kong residents appears to be what some have called a gesture that offers options to the residents of the island. But is the UK really in a position or even prepared to accept so many new people into the country? And if so, what exactly may await them on arrival?
我仲係好愛香港嘅，但係即係續咗本 BNO 先咯，然後睇下係咪真係落實，睇下佢啲即係條例啊嗰啲係點樣寫啊咁樣作決定咯。
Hello, or should I say Lehoma? Welcome to Economic Divide with me, Commentator. This week's show, we will be looking at the importance of Hong Kong to China, as well as studying its role in the international political and economic arena. We'll also examine whether the legacy of British rule until the year 1997 has an impact on the island today. As always, we want to hear from you. So why not check out our Twitter page at visiting @ED_program, where you can share your messages, photos, and your thoughts with us, as well as keeping up to date with news and information from us. Well, it's not just the British interest in Hong Kong that have hit the headlines, with the U.S. also using the island as an excuse to attempt to hit out at China. The U.S. trade balance with Hong Kong was $31 billion in the year 2018, which, although was a 4.5% decrease from the year before, is still something that could be dented from the U.S. withdrawal of the trade with the island. U.S. foreign direct investment, or FDI, in Hong Kong was some $82.5 billion in 2018, a 1.6% increase from 2017. The reserve saw Hong Kong alone invest some $15.7 billion into the U.S. in 2018, up some 42.6% from 2017, showing that a lot is at risk for both sides. Now, one of the biggest sectors to actually hit Hong Kong will be the sales of service industry, which will see the majority U.S.-owned affiliates see up to $20.6 billion lost in investment, whilst Hong Kong-owned firms in the U.S. could lose out on $5.8 billion, again showing that every sector could lose out in some form or another.
The United Kingdom handed Hong Kong back to the Chinese in July 1997, following 156 years of rule following the Opium Wars in the Far East. The occasion was celebrated by the Chinese by sending 4,000 troops from the army as a provisional legislative council was sworn in. Skip forward to modern times and Hong Kong is an integral part of China and sees Chief Executive Carrie Lam ruling over the territory. Following a spate of protests on the island, China implemented a security law which saw many people protest the notion of extradition to mainland China, stating that Hong Kong should be able to enjoy the benefits it has and be exempt from Chinese rule. The implementation of the law saw the likes of the US and the UK react to the decision by China as part of the Western foreign policy pressure on Beijing. The British took this opposition to the security law one step further by offering Hong Kong residents British citizenship, in fact to some 3 million people. But for many in Hong Kong, the offer was one of questionable doubt as what they would do once they arrived in Britain. The Chinese ambassador to the UK, Liu Xiaoming, also raised his concerns as to the offer.
The UK government keeps making irresponsible remarks on Hong Kong affairs through its so-called 6-monthly report on Hong Kong, make unwarranted accusations against the national security law for Hong Kong SAR, and even talks about changing the arrangement for British national overseas passport holders in Hong Kong. These moves constitute a gross interference in China's internal affairs.
Aside from the political implication of the UK making such an offer and clearly interfering in Chinese affairs, the question that remains to be asked is why did Britain offer to give so many people in Hong Kong British citizenship? One potential school of thought is the prospect that with so many Eastern Europeans leaving the UK, disillusioned by the way of life in the ex-EU island, the void left by those in low-skilled and manual jobs need to be filled, and hence why such an offer has potentially been made.
The UK is also heavily involved in trade with Hong Kong. No doubt part of the legacy of British occupation of the island. Currently, the UK is Hong Kong's 12th largest trading partner, with around $15.5 billion US of trade. The argument over Hong Kong and China has also seen the UK aim to ban the use of Chinese 5G technology in the country by the year 2027. But figures state that this withdrawal from the Huawei plan deal could set the UK back some £7 billion, according to research by Mobile UK. But could the UK's stance on Hong Kong have a greater and much more expensive consequence for Britain in the form of China, who currently sees the UK exporting some £30.7 billion worth of goods to China and receiving £49 billion worth of imports in return? With Britain desperate for trading partners following Brexit, can the ex-EU member island afford to lose such ties?
The UK has been treading on eggshells when it comes to China. On the one hand, it's desperate to maintain China as a trading partner, with literally everything found in the UK being made in China. Furthermore, the fact that the UK has shot itself in the foot by leaving the EU, it's now in dire need of tried and tested economic ties to other countries outside the bloc, and with China being tipped as the world's largest future economy, Britain could do with such ties. The UK initially appeared to be siding with China on the implementation of the UK 5G telecommunication network to be run by Huawei. However, it appears that the UK soon found out that irritated the powers that be in the corridors of the White House, and hence quickly reversed their loyalties back stateside, leaving the Chinese clearly realizing the UK was under the thumb of the Americans.
英方到底想不想保持他自己的独立的地位，还是甘心沦为美国的附庸，来为美国做一些火中取栗的事情？这个利益，他怎么权衡？我想，英国政府其实应该有责任做出最符合英国人民利益的决定。
For the US, however, the decision by the UK to leave Huawei in the dark was a cause to celebrate.
I want to take this opportunity to congratulate the British government for its principled responses to these challenges. You've made a sovereign decision to ban Huawei from future 5G networks.
Yet even in the UK, analysts were able to see that the UK's decision to end all participation with Huawei by the year 2027 would not only keep Britain back in the technological dark ages when it comes to superfast communication, but also realise that the US played a heavy hand in this decision.
So certainly the US politicians have made some bold threats over the last couple of weeks, but I think this storm will blow over. From the UK's perspective, this has been a risk management decision based on technical assessments, and essentially what they've done is limit Huawei from large parts of the network.
When it comes to Hong Kong, the UK have once again shown their allegiance by siding with the US in embracing the policies of Washington, and until now remain clearly at the beck and call of Trump et al.
Joining me in the studio today is Michael Dutton, a professor of politics from the University of London Goldsmiths. He holds a joint professorship with the Department of Literature in Beijing capital Normal University. Professor Dutton's work circles around his principal intellectual interest of social theory in his principal geographic archive, China. Professor, many thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on.
Okay, first question revolves around the history of the UK and Hong Kong. Why do you think the UK handed the island back to China, and just how much of a legacy remains between Britain and Hong Kong?
Okay, why did it hand back to China? Largely because the basis on which it actually first gained Hong Kong was the Opium Wars back in the 1840s. So the British took it over largely because in the Opium Wars, which they won and forced China to take opium, part of the deal was to give Hong Kong in perpetuity. Hong Kong was then used as a base to store their opium in those early days. That's essentially the background to the story. The legacy of that has been an ongoing view in China that the whole issue of Hong Kong is really one that's tied up with national integrity. Remember that the Communist Party in China gained power, some would argue, largely on the back of a nationalist push against the Japanese invasion. Hong Kong has always been seen as an integral part of China, and with Chinese nationalism as strong as it is still seen very much in that light.
Okay. Well, the UK has offered 3 million Hong Kong residents British citizenship, I'm sure you know that, following the introduction of the Chinese security law. Is this then a clear sign of British interference, you think, in Chinese interests?
From the Chinese perspective, there is one view. From the British perspective, there is another. From the Chinese view, it is gross interference in the internal affairs of China, largely because, as far as they're concerned, once the basic law was implemented, Hong Kong came back to China, and it was Chinese sovereign territory. From the British perspective, there is a kind of a legacy issue in part, which is tied back up to the history of colonialism, of which Britain, of course, was an eager participant and leader. Mostly after in the 50s and 40s and 50s and 60s, when decolonization was more often than not forced upon the British, a lot of the people who'd been working for the British colonial powers were given British citizenship. In Hong Kong, a decision was taken, given the numbers, to actually offer them a different type of passport, non-resident passport, and the transformation of that into a full offer of citizenship, of course, is seen by China as an attack.
Okay, lastly, the U.S. is stuck in a trade war with China, and Hong Kong appears to be a key strategic point in the long-term diplomatic conflict. How will the withdrawal of U.S. perks and interests affect Hong Kong, do you think? And is this again a direct attack on China by the U.S.?
Yes, once again, yes, it is. I think once again we have to be quite clear that there is a difference here between the United States and the United Kingdom and the response to Hong Kong. It seems to me, in terms of Britain, there is a colonial legacy and a certain sense, rightly or wrongly, that they still need to be able to, they still have a role to play in Hong Kong. Whether that's right or wrong is not the question. What is important is that it's a different set of interests to the Americans. The Americans seem to be using the Hong Kong issue in a fairly opportunistic way. We've seen the way in which they've swung into some very strong attacks against, for instance, China in terms of Xinjiang, in terms of human rights abuses, in terms of Hong Kong. That's not to say any of these things are unproblematic. It's simply to say that the Americans are gathering up ammunition to use in a trade war. Okay, thank you so much. That's Professor Dunn from Goldsmith University of London. Many thanks for being with us. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much. Now we're about to take a quick break here on Economic Divide, but don't go anywhere as we have plenty more coming up. We're joined by our new social media commentator, Sarah Karimi, as she takes us through some of the stories surrounding Hong Kong and China, also a look at the protests that have hit the island of Hong Kong, as well as looking at the One China policy and how it applied to Hong Kong and beyond. Also, we will take a look at other economic events happening around the world in our Info News section. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short message. All right, it's that part of the show where we bring in a new social media commentator, Sarah Karimi. Sarah, welcome. Hong Kong, tell us what you have chosen for a country that's experienced so much turbulence in the past year.
As we can see in the first tweet, it suggests that China is using Interpol to bring Nathan Law back to Hong Kong. It appears that the United States lacks extradition treaty with China. Therefore, it would make it impossible for China to demand a lawful return of the fugitives. Besides, it is likely that the U.S. will protect Nathan Law. which consequently start a diplomatic row between China and the US, and this could also lead to further friction and tension between the countries.
Okay, moving on to the next post.
So as you can see in the picture, there are some British national overseas passport holders or BNO holders protesting in Hong Kong. After the UK's Prime Minister offered citizenship to 3 million residents of Hong Kong. The interesting point here is that China itself does not recognize dual nationality, as this is part of the One China principle. And as Hong Kong is part of China, so the Hong Kongers should choose to take their British nationality or live in Hong Kong under the Chinese rules.
And moving on to your last tweet here.
So I believe this tweet raises a very important hurdle for those wishing to come to the UK from Hong Kong. Nowadays with Brexit, we can see there are so many people leaving the UK and are deeply disappointed by the poor quality of life in Britain. And mainly these people are the Eastern European workers who have held the entry-level or lower-end jobs. And so the question arises here is that who will fill the gap of these workers leaving Britain? For sure, Hong Kong imports will be used to fill the gap. And it is believed that this could cause or end up in a new wave of racism in the UK, mainly against the Chinese-looking people.
Sure, and of course the UK is experiencing this Brexit, and now you have 3 million, as this says, EU citizens who are living here. The right to do so was weaponized by key advocates for the HK plan. So we can see how the UK and the US is stirring the pot when it comes to China and angering them. Thank you so much. We appreciate your first time being on Economic Divide, and thank you for the tweets that you chose there. So now it's time to take a look at the protests that have been haunting Hong Kong for the last few months and assess whether their impact on the island, what kind of impact it has had, and how China is actually dealing with the issue.
Protests began in Hong Kong in 2019 when the Chinese considered the implementation of the Fugitive Offenders Bill, a law that would essentially allow the extradition of people breaking the law out of Hong Kong and to be tried in China. The demonstrations against the bill came mostly from the likes of student bodies who were both vocal and physical when it came to venting their concerns, resulting in arrests, lock-ins, use of force, and much public debate as to the bill, which was eventually suspended. The introduction of the security law by China saw a reaction by the US that sparked an executive order being issued by Donald Trump.
Today I signed legislation and an executive order to hold China accountable for its oppressive actions against the people of Hong Kong.
But the law was not to be taken lightly, as reiterated by Carrie Lam, the Hong Kong chief executive.
Well, the Hong Kong SAR government will vigorously implement this law, and I forewarn those radicals not to attempt to violate this law or crossing the red line, because the consequences of breaching this law are very serious.
But has foreign interference played a major part in the process that shook the Chinese island? For one, the United States' latest national security report has mentioned China some 33 times, and along with Russia, has been described as one of the revisionist powers that challenges the American status quo. Hong Kong for the US is also of both economic and military importance, with the island playing a significant role in Sino-US trade exchanges taking place. For many US businesses, Hong Kong is a vital window to China, with data showing that there are more than 1,300 US firms present, as well as some 85,000 US residents living in Hong Kong. It's with this information in mind that one can easily see how the Chinese are suspicious of foreign interference on Hong Kong and throughout the mainland, and hence why the Chinese are taking a particular interest in maintaining the security of their sovereign territory.
Time now for the Info News section, where we take a look at headlines from around the world. First, a look at a report with the headline Gilded Giving 2020, How Wealth Inequality Distorts Philanthropy and Perils Democracy. Takeaways from this report: the wealth of the billionaire class is growing so fast, it's simply outstripping their capacity to give it away. Next, the U.S. Washington Post reports how the U.S. economy is on the verge of a lost year, that workers and business owners are craving some certainty about the path forward. But the White House and Congress are failing to act. This comes on the heels of a new job report that said 1.8 million jobs were added. Although this is a good thing for the U.S., it is on top of the 22 million jobs that they have lost due to the COVID-19. Our final stop, South Africa. Recently, the government proposed a policy allowing mobile network operators to erect cell phone infrastructure on private property. South Africans have complained en masse, stating that this could devalue their property. South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world, with 40% of the population classified as being poor. If you have any stories that you would like for us to cover, please don't hesitate to send it to us. Our address is @ED_program, where you can share messages, photos, and your thoughts with us.
Hong Kong is undisputedly part of China and falls nicely under the bracket of the One China policy, a system which asserts that there's only one sovereign state under the name of China, opposing the idea that the country has two names. Also in a similar trait is the One China principle, a system that states both China's mainland and its offshore territories are part of a single China, and hence does not accept that any part of its territory can be deemed separate or independent from the mainland. Hong Kong, although an island that enjoys some benefits, is still part of China, as is Taiwan, according to the One China principle. However, much like the US and other Western state interference in the sovereignty of Hong Kong, Taiwan's also in a similar position, with the US insisting Beijing accept that Taiwan is an independent territory, something that China have clearly stated will never happen.
我们正告美方，台独是死路一条，纵容和支持台独，注定要失败。任何损害中国核心利益、干涉中国内政的行径，都会遭到中方有力的回击，也阻挡不了中国统一的历史潮流。
The resulting diplomatic tension surrounding Taiwan is one of huge importance to many nations around the world that align to either the US or China when it comes to recognizing Taiwan as an independent state, with the likes of the Dominican Republic, Panama, Iran, and many more refusing to recognize Taiwan as an independent nation, hence aligning themselves with the notion of the One China principle. Although Hong Kong has not seen itself embroiled in a similar situation as Taiwan, those that recognize the One China principle are also likely to oppose any foreign interference by Western states in Chinese affairs, such as Hong Kong, and hence highly condemn the actions of those trying to undermine China and raise internal conflict in the process.
There's no contention when experts and academics from around the world state that we are on the verge of a new Cold War, with a highly likely scenario being the emergence of multiple global powers who are competing with the United States. As China grows into a global political and economic superpower, and its sphere of influence reaches ever wider through the One Belt, One Road initiative, could the likes of the U.S. and its allies therefore be using every tactic possible to prevent or to delay the inevitable? With Hong Kong being a key piece in the puzzle, will the treatment of Hong Kong by the West be an example of things to come for China? Or will China be able to emerge from the impact of the coronavirus on the economy and simply brush off foreign interference in Hong Kong to prove the analysts right and see China, that is, break the U.S. hegemony? If you think things will be different, or you agree with the analysts about China and Hong Kong, why not share your thoughts on this or any other topic by visiting our Twitter page at @ED_program. We'd love to hear what you think. Remember, you can also catch this show again or any of our previous episodes by visiting our website and clicking on shows. Our service is available 24/7 and available across the globe. That's about the time we have for this episode. I've been Commentator on behalf of myself and the whole team here on Economic Divide. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.